Hello guys, welcome back to Basketball Fan. Let's get straight into it because today's topic isn't comfortable, but it's real. The Indiana Fever are standing at a crossroads, and tough decisions are coming whether fans like it or not. I'm just going to say it plainly, no sugarcoating, no soft landing. The Fever may have to move on from Kelsey Mitchell. I know some of you flinched reading that. I get it. This isn't about disrespect. This isn't about saying she isn't elite or that her game doesn't matter. This is about business timelines colliding with the financial realities of the WNBA's new CBA. If you truly want to build something sustainable and long-term around Caitlin Clark, then you have to be honest about what sacrifices are possible and which ones simply aren't. Here's the reality. The Fever don't just want highlights, sold-out arenas, and viral moments. They want real, sustainable success. They want to build a serious basketball operation that can contend year after year, not just ride a wave of excitement. And when you chase that kind of stability, tough decisions follow. Hard conversations happen. And yes, sometimes beloved players end up on the wrong side of the financial math. Head coach Stephanie White has publicly said that Mitchell was their #1 priority last year and is again this year. That sounds reassuring on the surface, but the real question is what priority actually means when contracts are signed and cap numbers are finalized. Because under the upcoming CBA structure, you simply cannot carry 3 max contracts and still build out a deep, competitive roster. The math doesn't bend for sentiment. If you lock in too much money at the top, depth disappears. Defense suffers. Bench production drops. And suddenly you're top-heavy and vulnerable. So the debate becomes crystal clear. Is Kelsey Mitchell willing to take less than a max deal to remain in Indiana? That's the entire conversation. Because if she's not, then the Fever face a serious dilemma. And let's be honest, would most people agree to show up to work for less than what they believe they've earned? Probably not. And no one should villainize her for wanting full value. This is professional sports. Careers are short. Windows close quickly. But front offices also have to think 2 and 3 years ahead. They can't just focus on today's lineup without considering tomorrow's obligations. Analysts like Annie Constable at Front Office Sports have already laid out the financial tightrope Indiana is walking. Keeping the entire core intact while also adding the necessary role players simply may not be realistic. Something has to give. And if you want a blueprint for how difficult that balancing act can be, look at the Las Vegas Aces. Their dynasty didn't magically materialize. It required sacrifice. Aya Wilson reportedly took less than she could have commanded. She wasn't even the highest-paid player on her own roster at one point. That distinction belonged to Jewel Lloyd when she was on a max deal. Wilson left a significant percentage on the table to preserve flexibility. Chelsea Gray wasn't on a max, Jackie Young wasn't either. That's how championship rosters are structured, not purely around ego, but around calculated sacrifice and shared commitment to a bigger goal. So again, the key question for Indiana becomes unavoidable. Will Mitchell take less to keep this core together? If the answer is yes, then negotiations can find middle ground. But if the answer is no, the Fever must be disciplined enough to consider a future without her. Because here's what no one wants to say out loud. The true financial priorities are approaching fast. In 1 year, Aaliyah Boston will be due for a max-level extension. A year after that, Caitlin Clark, already the face of the league and the engine of Indiana's momentum, will command hers. Those contracts aren't optional. They're foundational. And if the Fever are serious about building a sustainable contender, every dollar allocated today has to align with that future reality. That's not personal. That's business. And on Basketball Fan, we're going to keep having the real conversations, even when they're uncomfortable. Those two have to be the foundation, especially Caitlin Clark. Aaliyah Boston is essential to Clark's game, the pick and roll, the chemistry, the timing, that inside-out balance. It's not optional. It's the backbone of what the Indiana Fever are building. You don't sacrifice that future for short-term comfort or emotional loyalty. So here's what happens next if Indiana gives Kelsey Mitchell a full max contract right now. You lose depth. You likely don't keep Lexi Hull. You probably don't keep Sophie Cunningham. And let's be clear, those players aren't minimum contract talents, nor should they be paid like that. Cunningham is due for a raise. Hull is due for a raise. Not max money, but real, respectable money that reflects their value. That's why roster balance matters. I truly believe Indiana is better off building around Clark and Boston with strong, properly compensated role players than locking up a third star at max money and leaving the bench thin. That's how teams collapse: top-heavy payroll, no flexibility, no margin for error. And let me be crystal clear again, this is not an indictment of Mitchell's talent. She is absolutely a max-caliber player in this league. If she wants to chase that max deal, she should go get it, whether that's with the Chicago Sky, the Portland Fire, the Toronto Tempo, or anywhere else the money is right. But if she wants to stay in Indiana alongside Clark and Boston, that full max simply cannot happen under the projected cap structure. If the front office forces it anyway, that's bad business, short-sighted, emotional roster management instead of disciplined planning. I'd love to see a big three work. I really would. But with the new CBA framework being discussed, 3 max contracts on one roster just isn't realistic anymore. Somebody has to sacrifice. And here's the uncomfortable truth: Mitchell is older than Clark and Boston. She's not on the same long-term timeline. Clark and Boston are positioned to be in this league for a long time, stacking major contracts over multiple cycles. Mitchell is in her prime right now. If she's thinking she needs to collect everything she's earned in this moment, I don't blame her at all. But if that's the case, Indiana has to be prepared to move on. That's not hate, that's reality. Shout out to Robin Lundberg over at Sports Illustrated, who broke this down in a recent piece about why the Fever will face a serious challenge keeping their core together. None of this should surprise anyone. You can't afford to feed everybody. You can't hand out max contracts left and right and still field a complete, competitive team. That's just the math of the proposed CBA. Clark and Boston are the max priorities. Period. Everything else must be built around them. That means hitting on draft picks. That means finding veterans overseas who fit at the right number. That means zero wasted contracts. Annie Costabile of Front Office Sports laid out the numbers clearly, under the proposed $65 million cap, if Mitchell receives a new max that could exceed $1 million annually, and you combine that with Clark's and Boston's future max figures, while the average salary approaches $500,000, you're suddenly left with well below the average salary to fill out the rest of the roster. That's not sustainable team building. Even if the final cap number shifts slightly in negotiations, the core problem remains. Maintaining 3 high-level salaries while preserving depth requires near-perfect balancing, and historically, that's incredibly difficult. Add to that the fact that only Clark, Boston, and last year's rookie Michaela Timpson are currently under contract long-term, and key contributors like Hull and Cunningham are entering the market. Hull is a restricted free agent, which gives Indiana matching rights, but her hustle, defense, and improved shooting have boosted her value beyond average player territory. Cunningham has openly expressed her desire for both stability and a secure deal. Running it back won't be as simple as it sounds. Yes, Indiana benefits from Clark and Boston still being on rookie-scale contracts for now, but once those extensions kick in, the financial squeeze tightens dramatically. Last year, Mitchell returned under the core designation, effectively securing a max salary on a 1-year deal. Depending on how that rule survives the new CBA, Indiana could theoretically core her again for the short term. And here's where I land on Basketball Fan. If you bring Mitchell back, make it a 1-year, high-dollar deal. Fine. Run it back one more season. But once Boston hits her max window, that's the pivot point. You cannot lock Mitchell into a long-term max when Clark is up the following year for what will almost certainly be a supermax-level contract worth roughly 20% of the cap under current proposals. Even if that percentage changes slightly, the structural issue doesn't disappear. 3 max players plus meaningful depth under a hard cap is a near-impossible equation. So unless Mitchell is willing to take less money over multiple years, 2026 likely becomes her final season in Indiana. Mark it. The writing is on the wall. The Fever's financial priorities are Clark and Boston. That's the timeline. That's the future. And at some point, something has to give because you cannot pay everyone max money forever. Now get down in the comments and let me know what you think. Do you agree or disagree with this approach? Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share. This is Basketball Fan, and we're going to keep breaking it down with logic, not emotion.